The TEFL Commute, Season 5, Episode 1, in which Sean and I return after the holidays to discuss teacher staff rooms. Let's get started. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Lindsay. How are you doing?
Fine. Back after a little break from the podcast. And
did you miss it?
Yeah, I did a little bit. Yeah, I listened to some old episodes, and it's been a nice break.
Yeah, it's nice.
Been...
Yeah, good. Yeah, busy, but usual kind of filling the time with what we do when we're not doing podcasts, i.e. watching geeky movies and playing geeky games, those kind of things.
Exactly. For those of you joining us for the first time, this is the TEFL Commute, a podcast for language teachers that's not about language teaching, but the topic always seems to come up. My name is Lindsay Clanfield. I'm one of your hosts. The other host is?
And I'm Sean Wilden. I'm the other host, and I'm wondering how we're going to avoid the topic of teaching when we're talking about staff rooms.
I guess, yes, that's our topic today is staff rooms. And is this going to touch on teaching? Well, I have a few things to talk about with staff rooms. So yes and no, because the staff room is a place where teachers go, but it's actually not often teaching takes place there.
Yeah, what I found quite interesting was obviously researching for the episode is that when you start talking, when you start doing the obligatory internet searches for staff rooms, the person who seems to have written the most about staff rooms is you.
Yes. Well, I did end up writing. One of the first workshops I did was called "Surviving Your Staff Room," and as a result of that, I ended up writing a couple of articles on different journals and websites and stuff, and they kind of made their way around. So yes, when I was searching as well, I kept finding a couple of my own articles on that about ideas for a teacher's staff.
Yeah, but Lindsay, I've told you, stop putting your name in the search engine.
Well, Google already knows what to deliver me right away. Lots of things with my own name on it.
Yeah. Is that called that's ego surfing, isn't it? Is that the term for that?
It's Trump surfing.
Trump surfing. Well, let's not talk about that. Can we the podcast that kind of tries not to talk about Trump?
Okay, but we've already done so more than we wanted to. So let's just stop right there. Back to staff rooms. Before we talk about the stuff that I'd written about, which is suggestions for a staff room, one of the things that I have in my notes here is all the different things the staff room can be. I have a list here of 7 functions of a staff room. Yeah, because often we think of the staff room as just the place where teachers hang out, but I think there's several other kind of ways of looking at a staff room or what kind of things a staff room could be. Are you interested in hearing them, Sean?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, as in, if I didn't, then where would the podcast go?
Yeah, you don't have a choice. You're going to hear them, and so are the listeners. Everybody, you're now going to hear the 7 functions of a school staff room. So the first one is that you could imagine the school staff room is like an office. So it's a place where people work, and that would be the case for many of the staff rooms I worked in.
By working, you mean lesson planning and getting ready for teaching?
Lesson planning and so on and so forth. The other function of the staff room often has is like that of a cafe. So it's a place where you talk to fellow staff, where you eat and drink and so on, like tea, that is. So, there may be a coffee machine.
Well, some of the staff rooms I've been in, I don't think it was limited to tea.
Ooh, yeah, so like cafe/pub, but I think the ones I'm used to are more of a cafe type thing. Another function of a staff room is that of a refuge. So it's like a place to escape and have privacy. So this is a place where students don't come in, where teachers can talk freely amongst themselves and let off steam and so on.
Oh, have you worked anywhere where they do let the students in a staff room? Oh, that would be.
I think so, or I think there's been an open door policy, but students didn't abuse it. They didn't tend to come in a lot, but I've been in more places where it's been like, this is the teacher's room, no students allowed. The other kind of thing that I think lots of us would be familiar with as language teachers is the staff room as a library, where a lot of books are, documentation is, and so on and so forth. So I remember staff rooms in the past, binders with activities in it and photocopiables. Maybe that's been replaced by folders on computers now. But do you remember that, Sean? Like in a staff room, like big binders full of things.
It's interesting that you say they're on computers now. I'm lucky in the work that I do these days to be able to go to a number of language schools, part as an inspector or a guest or as a trainer, and I don't think computers have made much difference to the amount of folders that are still there. I think most staff rooms are I guess that library can also become a stroke museum, because I don't think people throw away old books or old folders and stuff like that. It's kind of tripped down ELT memory lane.
Yeah. Another thing that's a bit in the same vein as a library is that the staff room as a storeroom. So it's a place where you leave your personal belongings in a safe and secure environment. One hopes.
Yes.
You either have your pigeonhole, or maybe you have a locker, or you have a kind of space of the desk and so on. This is where staff rooms can get problematic, because there's sometimes a hierarchy. It's like the more senior teacher who has the whole big table in the corner and everyone else has a little pigeonhole. I've been in a staff room like that.
I just thinking about I think mine was divided. Actually, this is a long time ago, but going into what was the staff room I spent most of my teaching career in. When I first went into it, it was also nationality divided. It was kind of like the English teachers sat there, the German teachers sat over there.
That's true. Yes, and same thing in the Department of Languages where I taught at the university. It was like that as well. There was one part where it was the other languages and one part for English. Oh yeah, that's true. Wow. Okay, 2 more functions of a staff room: a place to find out information and news. So the staff room as a notice board. And finally, the staff room as a classroom, an extra place to teach when other rooms are full or in use. And I've never had a staff room serve that purpose, but I could see it happening.
I've seen that. I've seen a staff room become an overspill for things like if a student had missed doing a test, or they needed to do a placement test and there wasn't a spare room, then definitely I've seen it as an overspill in that way. I think that's the one that would annoy me the most, actually, because I think for me the staff room is that refuge amongst all those things. I think it is the place that you've got to be. We did an episode a season or 2 ago called Behind Closed Doors, and I think this is when we were talking about the classroom, but I think there needs to be a behind the closed doors for the staff room.
Lots of things.
The escape, the refuge. The question I've got when you see these categories is, can the staff room be all these things at once? And I think
let me just review the categories for our listeners. So we had office, cafe, refuge, library, storeroom, notice board, and classroom or overspill room. And to answer your question, Sean, I think so. I think certainly like at least 3 or 4 of these categories would be for most staff rooms, right? Like maybe the office, refuge, and cafe all kind of go together. Also with library, I suppose, as well. I mean,
but the reason why I say that is, and it's something. I mean, I worked at a very large language school, and where and the classroom space was quite limited. And I think one of the tensions within the school was actually the multiple uses of the staff room. And we found, as the school evolved and we developed the staff room and we developed the spaces, we actually tried to have different spaces assigned to different things. Because I think if a person's trying to have a refuge and at the other time it's a cafe, those two things don't mutually go together. The person that wants that privacy and quietness is being put off by the people who are sitting, eating, drinking and talking. And the person that wants to plan their lessons is finding it annoying that the table's full of eating and drinking stuff. Do you see what I mean? And in fact, this actually was a tension within the staff room. And one of the ways that I think we improved the school was by defining these areas and trying to break down like the barrier of the language teachers for starters and those kind of things. So I do wonder how much, it's probably a little bit deep for this podcast, but how much all these different uses, different functions, which I completely agree with, do cause tension within staff rooms.
Yeah.
You didn't thought about that,
Sorry, what was that?
You hadn't actually thought about it from that angle, had you?
No. Well, I'd mostly thought of the staff room as also of the social functions of the staff room rather than the work functions of the staff room. That's what I suppose if I had to rank these, I'd be ranking the social functions of the staff room higher. Because I think that, if you hear a teacher say about their school, it's a really great place to work, I think one of the first things they're talking about there is the social feeling between and among the teachers, more than, for example, high pay or super great students, although that could be part of it. But I think when you hear teachers saying, the school that I'm working is a great place to work, you're talking about like how they get along with the social relationships you have with your colleagues.
Definitely. But I wonder now, as I'm talking, I wonder again if this is context, of course, because ELT teaching takes place in so many different contexts. And I think the staff room I'm talking about was, a private language school that ran from 7 in the morning to 9 in the evening. And teachers would often come into the staff room, they'd have a break in their teaching and they'd be there for hours on end so they prepare. So that, rather than perhaps, for want of a better description, a 9 to 5 staff room of perhaps a state school where you're not going to sit around and work as much as of it. I wonder if the different contexts have different effects on it. Maybe there's a research thing that we should look at there. Let's go. Somebody must give us money and we can go research it. The psychological aspects of the functions of a staff room.
Well, there has been some research done.
There we go.
There's one which was a book called Behind Closed Doors.
Right.
Same title as one of our podcast episodes. But this was written by 2 Israeli academics, Miriam Ben Peretz and Shifra Shonmaon. I'll put it in the show notes. But what they did is they put up cameras in an Israeli secondary school teachers lounge and just let them roll.
Wow!
And then the whole book is a social cultural study of what went on in the staff room. So we can put a link to that book because that looks. I was browsing through the sort of sample pages online and it looked quite interesting. It also reminds me of something that another colleague of ours who has come on the podcast before, Philip Kerr, did, where he was spending quite a bit of time in different kinds of staff rooms, and he would take notes of what he would be overhearing.
Right.
So, and what he would overhear, for example, in state school staff rooms was very different than what you would hear in private academy staff rooms. Whereas and in terms of like, were people talking about the latest second language acquisition theories in any of those staff rooms? No, there was often a lot of other kinds of things going on. And I'd have to try to find out from him more on this. But so definitely there is an area of research. If any of you are listening to the podcast thinking of a master's or a PhD dissertation topic, we think that it would be really interesting to have one on what goes on in English language teaching staff rooms.
You've got me thinking now. Is an eighth function of a staff room a place for professional development?
Well, I think it can be. I think one of the things about a staff room can be a sharing space where people, and some of the staff rooms I've been in, and there's always been that idea, does anyone have an idea of what to do or a really nice activity that could go well with this grammar point I'm teaching or this part of the book, or people, complaining about a part of the book and then someone suggesting, hey, well, I do it this way, or someone saying, oh my gosh, I've got too many students. Anyone give me some tips?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I kind of meant. I think I learned I learned a lot of what have become my stock teacher toolkit ideas from the staff rooms I've been in. Good ideas for games, activities, classroom management issues are often because of that. Does anyone know attitude of it? So I guess I'm just trying to think if it fits into your 7 functions before, or whether I've created an 8th function.
An 8th function, like a development place,
a place of development,
training area.
But,
yes, I'm sure that a lot of the folk wisdom of teaching is passed along through staff rooms, probably.
It's with it. I think this is interesting that you label the functions of the office, the cafe, or whatever. I came across an article in English Teaching Professional, which again I'll put the link on, where they described it from the person point of view. So the staff room is the greet and go place, or the support group, or the amateur dramatics group, or the circle of trust, which I think is an interesting way of looking at the of the characters that you get within in a staff room, and it's quite a nice juxtaposition to your functions that you put in there. But I'll share the link for people to have a look at fully later on with it. But yeah, I wonder. One of the things on it is this idea of competitiveness. Do teachers play one-upmanship in a staff room? I'm better than you.
I think for sure that can happen. I think, well, I mean, it depends. We both have worked in various different staff rooms. What do you remember, Sean, as a particularly positive staff room that you worked in, or as a particularly negative staff room?
Well, I think the same staff room fulfilled both roles, because I was there. I worked in the school for such a long time. It was such an evolving space, and I think one of the things I remember is why the idea of the professional development place went through. And I think it was just one of those moments when when you get ELT is often seen as a very transient profession from the private language point of view. And it was just one, the staff room I was in at one point in time, there were a lot of people who were all still in ELT and took it very, very seriously. And it became a place where we actually did sit down and talk about second language acquisition theory, because we all did our deltas at the same time. And then we all shared activities. And I, that for me was a very positive experience. But then by the same token, as those staff left and people changed and the school did different things and staff reacted to the school in different ways, it also became quite a negative space when we realised, as I talked about earlier, these functions were sort of clashing with each other. So I think my best and worst is the same staff room, but over a number of years, and it just shows you how the dynamics change within it.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think probably one of my first staff rooms that I worked in was probably one of the worst, where it was very much certain teachers had their own turf. It was don't touch this, don't touch that. Every staplers labeled with the teachers' names. I was a junior teacher at the university and, had my little pigeonhole, but, someone told me, whatever you do, do not leave anything on that desk because that teacher will just push it off the desk into the garbage. While you're not there, that kind of stuff. So that was like a very fractured staff room. I'm sure we have colleagues listening to this podcast that have been in staff rooms like that. And also there was a considerable amount of moaning in that staff room. So like every time I'd come in, people, the thing to do was just complain about students, or about the administration, or the latest change in administration rules, or speculating on who's going to get moved up or promoted or whatever. So that was not nice. One of the best ones was in a private academy in Barcelona with colleagues of mine, and this is what I wrote about in those articles that you found online. We started doing lots of things very deliberately to make the staff room really, really nice. At the time, this was, again, before like widespread internet and tablets and stuff, but we would put up a crossword puzzle, one of the quick crossword puzzles. Every morning someone would put it up, and then anytime people would be coming in and chatting, having a cup of tea, everyone would kind of gather around the crossword puzzle and all start doing it together.
To do what we did, we used to do that a different way. The foreign language newspapers were so expensive that the person that bought the newspaper that day photocopied the crossword and put photocopies up for people to take, because it was just so expensive. So it wasn't the group thing, but.
What we would do is we'd have a timed one. So the crossword puzzle would go up at 9 a.m.
Right.
And whenever we finished it, like whoever finished the last word would break the time. So I think like the fastest was that people
cool idea.
At 9:45 a.m. So that was like a really nice group thing. We also started collecting this week's top 10. We started with ELT stuff, but then quickly moved on to other things. Like we started with like our top 10 grammar points, but then it was things like, this week was the top 10 smells.
You're a list fanatic, aren't you? Because your blog, your former blog, where also you wrote about staff rooms, was a list blog as well, wasn't it? So
exactly. So lists were really a good thing. I mean, another thing that we did is.
I mean, I think what you're actually talking about though is something to build the group dynamics, and I think this is actually something I'm just thinking is something that's overlooked, and I think this is where management can play a part. I mean, obviously, I think the staff room is a staff space rather than a manager's space or a student space, but actually applying group dynamics, which we do to classes all the time. I mean, one of the things when we take classes on is deliberately do stuff to make the dynamics of the group work, to build a rapport.
I think the staff room is where that kind of stuff can happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So even just like making the atmosphere in the staff room is nice. In that same good staff room that I had, things were going so well, and all of a sudden somebody brought in 2 little plants and put them in different parts of the staff room, and it just made the place so much more homey. I mean, it made it really nice. There's also an argument to be said of like having a coffee machine there, although that can be good and bad, because there's nothing that creates more fights in a staff room than dirty mugs.
I'll go
Just
the other
being
way. It wasn't that we used to have a cat. Yeah, the mugs. My old head of English would moan about mugs all the time. But one of the most positive things I've seen put in staff rooms are water machines. You know, those water dispensers.
Yes.
I think they really improve the atmosphere in the staff room and with it. I think kettles, there are all sorts of problems here. I did suggest that a kettle be put in a staff room in a school recently, and of course it was in the UK, and they said, "Oh, you know the health and safety issues if we put a kettle in." And we're like, so that. And one of the things.
Here's a question then. Sorry, here's a question. Since we're talking about this and like recommendations to managers or head teachers or whatever, Sean, let's take turns. What would you put into an ideal staff room? Budget is no issue. Imagine we have a big room, lots of space. What things would you put in that staff room? Budget being no issue. Take turns. You say one, I say one.
Okay, so I'm obviously going to go for the fastest possible free Wi-Fi.
Okay, fast possible free Wi-Fi. Okay, I'm going to go for like long, two long couches on the sides of the wall, as well as big table in the middle. Sorry, I said two things. Okay, I'll say just one. Long couches.
I would go another way. I would have a separate area with a bed.
A bed?
Yes, because I'll go back to this again. Some of my old in the old split shift system of teaching, where you might end up, unfortunately, with lessons first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And if you don't have time to travel home, like if you live out the city or whatever, then a place to relax, a place that the teachers can go and have a quick 40 winks. And you'll find it impressive. The improvement in the teacher's mood is incalculable.
Okay. I'm going to put then big long table down the middle of the room and small cubicle tables off to the side, so you could work on the side, or you can all kind of work together in the middle. Your turn.
We've done comfortable seating. We've done the internet. We've done the tables. We've already talked about free drinks and so on. I would get in. I know you can see that I'm now struggling because I'm not sure what else to. Actually, no. What I would put in is a relaxation area. An actual defined relaxation area that's off away. So there's probably a TV or a games area, something just to relax, so people can relax.
Wow. It looks like our dream staff room is going to like take up 3 classroom sizes of the real school.
Well, you said it was a dream staff room. Well, it's quite interesting because what I'm actually thinking about is we're talking about staff rooms, obviously, from an educational point of view, but staff rooms or break rooms exist in almost all industries. And I took my preparation for this podcast a different way and looked at what business would say. And so business says 10 essentials of the most successful company break rooms. And they are free coffee, lunch tables, differentiation, which is kind of what we're talking about with the functions, but also the differentiation in terms of different colours of different parts of the staff room. That you should, the wall should have different colours and so on. Games, so there's a breakout thing there. The decoration in terms of posters on the wall or your plants that you talked about.
Not walls with peeling paint, definitely.
Healthy food options. So that there was some food, fresh vegetables, grains, those kind of things on it. Comfortable seating, you noted. Televisions, we noted. Celebrations should be held in there. So remembering people's birthdays, an important stepping stones in the company. And anything take seriously anything requested by the staff themselves. So they would say that. So that was the kind of a number of websites listed these as the essential things for a successful break area, which for us would be the staff room, which I found quite interesting. Then there is this colour thing. There is this whole idea of should your staff room be feng shuied?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I can't even remember feng shui except from what I taught in course books about feng shui, so I wouldn't know the first thing to say that.
Blue is a good colour. Blue and yellow. Apparently, there you go. You see, you live and learn on this podcast. You now know that you can go out and say, well, our staff room should be blue because it's better for the feng shui. We still got time, haven't we? We're talking about staff rooms, of course, from our own point of views. And one of the interesting things that's happened in education, of course, is that staff rooms have become very global over the last few years because of the development of the internet, and people have what people label as their personal learning networks, which are essentially staff rooms. I joined Twitter way back when because it became like the global staff room, and
there was a time where it felt like that.
Yeah.
For me, I'm sure it does for some teachers still, but I remember when I started, it did feel like being part of a global staff room. Yeah, you're right.
It's one of those interesting things. I mean, your article that I found was actually for 2008, I think, and you do mention the cyber staff room there as a kind of a developing thing. But now, 9 years later, it is a huge part of it. And a number of Facebook groups that act as staff rooms where people share ideas and share things. And I think this is really interesting that you kind of, I think you find out as well that the teaching scenarios that you have in your country are very similar to what they are in other people's, and this actual then this global sharing of ideas, which I did at the time when I first discovered it. It really reinvigorated me as a teacher for it. And people do sometimes look disparagingly on social networks, but I do think that idea of the cyber staff room is an interesting development of within social networking. For it.
And like any staff room, you can have good and bad experiences there.
Oh, totally, yeah. And you get the people, and as one of my friends always says, it gives everybody a voice. So so sometimes the teacher that's spouting off all the time is perhaps the show-off role of the physical classroom is the same on the cyber network, and it can be a bit much with it. I was going to say, we got to touch on the one thing I liked. You talked about the crossword and the plants. The one thing I really liked in my staff room when I first moved in was the idea of the week. And it was
a sharing board. Yeah. We had a sharing board where you would share like an activity or an article or a game or a photocopiable of the week. Yeah, that was great. That I would recommend to any school staff, any English department staff room for sure.
It's one of those things. Well, we've covered quite a lot, haven't we?
I think we have. Shall we whisk off to a desert island, Sean?
I can't see why not. I can hear the seagulls now. Welcome to the desert island. Yes, you heard that right. Desert island. A section lovingly named after all those students who've had trouble sorting out their puddings from their sand. Loosely based on an idea that the BBC had some years ago, we interview a person in ELT about things they would take with them if they suddenly had to go and teach on a remote island. And of course, we also find out what dessert they take with them to eat. So we're on the desert island again, and in this episode I'm talking to Damien Williams, who is an author, teacher trainer. He organised and runs the map of the urban linguistic landscape. So as I mentioned in the introduction, Mull. I mean, Mull is one of my favourite things about social media. It kind of draws me to Facebook more than most other things. Where did you get the idea from for it, and what is it for people who might never have been there? Do you just want to tell us what it is? And
well, yeah, basically it all started a few years ago. It's a collaboration between me and a guy called Stephen Green, who you might have heard of as well, who's based in Brazil. And we were kind of going to conferences together, and we both kind of realised that we were both interested in linguistic landscapes because it seemed kind of something new. And this was also kind of born out of the time when technology was the big thing, and it's all you'd hear about at conferences. There's lots of people sharing pictures of what we call interesting language use, which isn't very well defined, but purposely so, because we like to encourage as many contributions as possible. Facebook groups seemed a perfect place to host that and invite people to share their photos as well.
What I've actually found myself is I actually pay more attention to my landscape now, because I'm kind of walking around looking to take a photo that I can put into the group.
Exactly what I found. Super addictive as well, because you can't, once you started noticing it there, you can't stop noticing it's there all the time. I mean, the idea is, like, as you said yourself, once you start looking at things, you become more aware of it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the idea is to kind of install that in students as well. because it's not just in English language speaking countries that you see English being used in the street and stuff. So it's kind of making them more aware of all the language that surrounds them. We've got a companion website.
That's it, the website. Okay.
And there's some activities up there and stuff that we've shared.
Of course, now I'm going to remove you from all that and put you on our desert island where you're going to teach an undefined group. So you've got no camera, you've got no access to the thousands of pictures that are on Mull. But we're not that mean. We do allow you to take some things with you. So one of the things we say that you can take with you is a methodology book.
Now I've been trying to decide. There are two methodology books. Just briefly mention the other way because it had such a big impact on my own development as a teacher. And that was a book that was published in 2000 called Language Play, Language Learning by Guy Cook.
Yes.
And it's great because it was kind of this big antithesis to the communicative approach. And it's basically saying things that, language use doesn't have to be realistic and real life in class. It can be kind of fantastical and you can escape into other worlds, and that actually makes it more interesting.
And what was the one that you might have taken?
So the one that I think I would take, it's a bit older than that. It's a book by Michael Lewis, The English Verb.
Oh, okay.
And it's, as a teacher trainer, it's one that I come back to time and time again, and I kind of recommend it to trainee teachers and stuff. For me, it's the book that you were a certain type of teacher before you read it, and then you're a certain type of teacher after you read it. As teachers, and starting out in our career, we tend to kind of follow course booky type grammatical rules. Now, problem with a lot of these rules about grammar is that they're quite prescriptive. What I like about the English Verb is it looks at it's very much more descriptive than prescriptive, and it looks at what's actually involved in the grammar of English. So, like, for example, there's a book where he talks about conditionals and saying, we often learn that there's zero conditional, first conditional, third conditional. And then he just lists a page with 28 examples which break all the rules.
Okay, so that's your methodology book. So we also allow you to take a resource book of something of that ilk. So what do you have for that?
For me, it would have to be Taboos and Issues.
That's a book I haven't heard for a while.
Yeah. It's a bit dated now, isn't it? And it does need kind of updating a bit, I think, to use in a class these days. But it's been, again, it's through my teaching career, it's been a book that I've returned to again and again. Again, I think there's a lot of, there's this whole idea of kind of parsnips, things that publishers don't like to include in books. So I can't remember.
Now you're on the spot, aren't you?
Yeah. Pigs, sex, something like that.
Alcohol, isms, and yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Which, again, I think that's quite controversial because a lot of the time it can be interesting to include these things in a classroom if your learners are mature and kind of able to deal with it sensitively. But I think there is a lot of potential if they're not handled exactly right, not just by the teacher, but by students as well, then they can be quite offensive and they can cause offence, And what I like about Taboos and Issues is I think it balances those kind of two scenarios well. It introduces these like controversial topics, but it also gives the teacher the judgment, the ability to make the judgment in the classroom situation as to how far to take each of these topics.
Right. So interesting choice there. And your third thing then is something to help you with teaching. This is where you say the internet.
Kind of. I was going to say access to music.
Okay.
Because that's always, I think in my own teaching, it's always appeared heavily, both in terms of kind of using songs in the classroom and rhyming language, rhythmic language, that kind of thing. But also, different ways of using background music. I've always tried to use that in my classroom.
Okay, so before I leave you to your own devices on the island, obviously this is Dessert Island for legal reasons, but it does give us the excuse to say, what is your favourite dessert and why?
No doubt about it, apple crumble.
Oh, okay, that's a very very traditional kind of dessert.
Oh, it's always been my favourite dessert. I'm not actually that big on desserts.
Oh, okay.
The big question with that, although, of course, is custard, ice cream, or cream.
You know what? I was ready and primed to say, so what do you have it with? Custard. So I'm going to guess custard.
Definitely.
Damien, it's now time to leave you on a desert island. Enjoy the teaching. I hope the students there enjoy the apple crumble. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Sean, do you think that a staff room, we've kind of been raving about staff rooms, what we like about them, potential problems, conflicts, and so on. But do you think the staff room should be a right for teachers? Like as in legally protected, that every school should have a staff room for teachers. Should that be a right?
I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to do provide a couple of provisos here. Again, context, and I think if we're talking about a right, then we're probably looking at government-controlled schools, private language schools. I think it should be a right, but then it depends on the type of school. But I do think there should be a place for the staff to be able to meet and do it. I mean, from one of the organisations. The organisation I work for the most, that I'm known for working for, it's actually in their charters that the school must provide a staff room space. So, yes.
Well, yes, and not surprisingly, because I found out in my research for this episode that does exist as a right in the UK for schools. So we're talking about state schools here. And I suppose in several private schools, they might have it in their charter, like the one you were talking about. But it is a right, according to the UK government. And in 2012, they proposed removing the staff as a right, leaving it up to individual schools to decide. This was eventually struck down or didn't go through, from what I can understand. Why do you think a government would want to remove the right of a staff room to exist? Why would they do that?
Have you lived in the UK recently?
Well, I know why. It was a rhetorical question. According to the article I read, and yes, this would link into what you're saying, but the idea of a staff room, removing it as a right, staff rooms also tended to be a place where union organization or work rates could be discussed, where teachers could kind of organize amongst themselves. So removing it as a right then made it easier for that to be curtailed.
But it's common. I mean, all right. I mean, it's ridiculous. What would you expect without a staff room? What would you expect? You're walking around with like your books and your coat, and I mean, okay. I mean, perhaps it doesn't. I mean, an ideal staff room covers all those functions that we talked about at the beginning, but you can't go from even kind of part of that to no staff room. I mean, you've got to give someone the space to just escape.
I suppose they could just kind of put lockers in a corner of the place where you would just leave your books and go and
So what you go and do is sit between classes. You have to still sit in the classroom, so you never get the chance to. You've got to be able to switch off, haven't you? You've just got to be able to switch off, even for 10 minutes.
That's true. That's true.
It's kind of, but as I said, I mean, I know that was 4 years ago. I'm surprised I'm surprised the current government, well, it was the same government, hasn't decided to bring that one back in, try that one again.
Maybe they have, and we haven't heard about it.
They could change. Well, that's true. Though we have got bigger things to talk about in the UK at the moment. That's for sure. But yeah, no, it's a very odd thing. But again, I just can't imagine it because there's such an important, I think we one of the things this episode has really kind of shown is that how important a staff room is, and because of what you can do and get from being there. So I think it's removing a very large part of education if you didn't have a staff room, and a lot of opportunities being missed.
I think that this brings us to a good moment to stop our first episode of our new season. I think we've covered most things about staff rooms, don't you?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. Although that was a bit of a door note to end on, wasn't it? It was like,
Sorry, guys.
Hi, welcome back.
Yes, keeping in tune then with 2017. Make sure you stand up for your rights. That includes your staff room rights.
Yes, exactly.
That'll be our closing, hopeful, fist in the air message.
Yeah, but it was a good discussion. I think people don't think about staff rooms the way we've just talked about it. So hopefully we've provoked some thoughts there with it, and of course we'll leave the podcast with some ideas, developing some of those ideas that we've talked about that you could do in your staff room. So anyway, Lindsay.
Yes. If you have any things you'd like to share with us about your staff rooms, you can leave a comment for us at www.teflcommute.com or on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page. If you are just coming to this podcast for the first time, for this first episode of the new season, welcome. If you're a return visitor, thanks for coming back. Make sure to tell all your friends. We're getting the numbers for our listeners are going up every season, and it's very gratifying.
I was listening to a couple of new podcasts, not ELT ones, podcasts last week, and they were doing, rather than make sure you tell your friends, they were grab your friend's phone when they're not watching and subscribe to the podcast.
That's great. Well, we'll be back again in a couple of weeks to talk about yet another topic of burning and scintillating interest to language teachers that might not be about language teaching, although that will surely come up in it somehow. My name's Lindsay Clanfield.
You were about to say my name's been Lindsay Clanfield.
I know.
I was about to say, what are you now?
It's Lindsay Clanfield. You've been with Lindsay Clanfield and...
what's my name? Oh, yeah. And I'm Sean Wilden. Enjoy your commute, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Bye.
As your commute is coming to an end, here are a couple of ideas for you to try out in your staff room. In the episode, we talked about things you can do to brighten your staff room, and Sean mentioned the idea of the week. This is a way to encourage the sharing of resources and to help foster trust and mutual respect in the staff room. Find a place on the staff room wall to start an idea of the week board. Each week, one teacher puts up an idea, a piece of material, or an activity which has worked for them and they feel that other teachers could use. It doesn't have to be something that they created themselves. For example, it might be a new activity that they've come across in a resource book. They put the material up along with a reason for its choice. The following week, another teacher puts up an idea, and so on. Lindsay mentioned that he used to put up the daily crossword for the staff to solve together. Encouraging collaborative fun and games is a good way to build a cohesive staff room. You can find a crossword on most newspaper sites. Print that off and use that. Alternatively, put up word games or puzzles for teachers to tackle. Another thing he used to do was top 10 lists, where people had to write up their top 10 films, activities, books, places they'd been, etc. You can find the instructions for these activities at our website, www.teflcommute.com. You've been listening to the TEFL Commute, an original podcast produced and presented by Lindsay Clanfield, Sean Wilden and James Taylor. Don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing to us on iTunes and by visiting us at www.teflcommute.com.